So Alex, you've been a software engineer since 1998. So what are the biggest changes in tech which you've seen over the past 25 years? You know, is it AI? Is it Web3? Is it something else? What are the main couple of things which you think are changing the world and are different to when you started as opposed to today?
There's a lot of answers to that question, Alfie. So I think obviously technology evolves, and that's a never changing landscape, and it's part of the reason why many people love the industry that we're in. There's a lot of new technology that comes. AI is definitely the big one at the moment, but I think for me, there's a cycle that repeats itself, and it happens with all technology, and you can see it. So I work across emerging tech and blockchain, for example. AI has a similar set of challenges with it right now. But one of the things that I find most enjoyable or most rewarding from a perspective of engineering is introduction of skill sets like DevOps. So I think that automation of environments and infrastructure is probably one of the single biggest changes, and I think that then led itself nicely towards cloud engineering. Excuse me, and those two things almost go hand in hand, but they have enabled a whole new range of capabilities for engineers. They remove a lot of the challenges and the pain and the frustration and delays that happen across it, and that's helped technology scale. And I think as all new technologies come on board, the first challenge is how do we use this technology? What's it capable of? And then very rapidly it becomes a case of, once those challenges are overcome and use cases become more apparent and technology gets adopted, it then becomes a case of how do we scale that technology and how do we make it repeatable? How do we integrate it with other technologies? How do we test it? And that's where automation starts to grow. And so you can see that now in emerging technology space, where working on the blockchain has a lot of interesting challenges that are around the same and feel as embryonic now as perhaps software engineering did back in the 90s, when working with sort of older, was classed as older technologies, and I don't want to name any just to triggering anyone, but so I think and I think those are the sort of DevOps world is a really interesting area, and I think it's one that will continue to evolve and expand. And as we move into AI, those same questions of how do we automate and apply consistency and scalability across all of those new technologies.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. Okay, so on top of being a CTO, you're also an associate lecturer at Anglia Ruskin University. So what advice would you give to young people, such as your students, who are looking to start a career in software engineering in 2024, in 2025?
Well, it's a bit of a cliche to say, do the thing you love. But I think that really does ring true. I think technology at the moment and developing the traditional role of a developer is evolving again, unsurprisingly, but I think it's opening a whole new set of opportunities. For me, I've always felt that. So there's a great quote by a guy called Arthur C. Clarke, who is a science fiction writer, and he has these 3 rules, and what the third rule is that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I love that rule, but I also hate it. And the reason I hate it, well, the reason I sort of hate it is because technology really isn't magic. I get it. It does look like that sometimes, but it's technology. It can be discovered. It can be understood. It can be repeated. And we're all very used to thinking of technology in a magical way, especially when you're a student and when you're young. So you'll use a phone and understand the magic it can bring you without necessarily understanding how it works. So the idea of magic can be an enabler, but also it can stop people thinking that they can do it too. And so when I've worked with students across all ages, from the age of 9 upwards, helping them understand that getting to a place where they feel confident that they can do it too is half of the challenge. So for me, helping students discover their capability is part of understanding that technology is not magical. I think that where the reason I love that quote so much is because I think when technology works and when you're an innovator or a creator of technology, it really does feel magical. And so I think the goal for all engineers and product people, anyone who is building technology, is to create solutions that feel magical. That's irrespective of whether it's a light switch or a mobile phone or a fusion reactor. It should just work, and it should work seamlessly and wonderfully and deliver value. And if you get it right, then you're lucky enough to have nailed it. And usually the people who you're delivering that value to will love it enough that they'll just tell their friends. And we capture that in the industry in all sorts of metrics, from NPS scores, through to satisfaction surveys. But what we're always trying to do is create an emotional response that gives people value in their lives, that feels magical. It's made their day easier. And equally, I think we all probably reserve a special kind of rage for when it lets us down, right? And when technology doesn't work and it doesn't do what we should, or what we think it should do, it doesn't make us feel great. We get mad, understandably, and that's fine. And for students, I think that the journey of discovery and the constant evolution of learning that has to happen when you're in technology has to be something that you love. And so if you don't love learning and relearning and reminding yourself constantly that what you learned 2 or 3 years ago is now not the way to do it, or there's a better way, or there's a more improved way, then you're facing what might be quite a tough life.
Yeah. I love that quote. It's the Arthur C. Clarke one. I actually have a poster of that exact quote in my house, and I get what you say. You love it, you hate it. I understand what you're saying. But what about in terms of if students should even still learn to code? There is an argument out there, not necessarily one that I subscribe to, but some people say that because of the advancements in AI and AI starting to do a lot of the coding now as a co-pilot, but then soon perhaps as a junior engineer, and then maybe it will be a mid and then a senior, and then soon you won't even need developers. Is learning to code still something? I can't believe I'm saying that, but is it something that people should still be doing? Do you think?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And I believe so because I think we've got a number of years left of humans being involved in that process, and more often than not, in my experience, engineering is not the challenge. We've never had a problem being able to develop code or products, and that's been the case for tens of years. And it changes, it evolves, it gets easier. But and I think AI for me is a massive enabler. I would argue that actually now is a great time to learn, because you can have the benefit of engineering knowledge on your desktop available 24/7, as long as you're paying for enough credits that it doesn't run out. But so I think now is a great time to learn. I think it's a really good opportunity to rapidly evolve. I do think it's challenging market for students and certainly for junior engineers. But I think that the ones that are, as I've always thought, I don't think you need a degree necessarily. There are some people that really enjoy the academic sort of learning journey, and I think it's great for them. But I think also that if you can prove delivery, and you can have a great conversation, understand how things work, and really dig into the detail, I think that's what matters. And the challenge has always been understanding requirements. And whilst we're great at writing code, we're not always so great at working out what the requirements are. And so I think there's a potential shift towards, I've always been a big fan of the term product engineers. For me, product engineering is around engineers who understand the complexity of engineering challenges, but are keen and eager to talk to customers and to listen acutely and understand what the challenges that they're facing are, and how to get to the delivery of value as quick as possible. So I think that kind of engineer, one that really is interested in all of that space, is hugely needed in the industry. There aren't enough of them, and we always need more. So I think it is a great opportunity.
This is a quick message to tell you about Alpha. I'm so excited to announce that we have created this incredible new tool which works as your personal AI recruiter. If you are hiring software engineers in the UK, then you need to check this out. Just type in your hiring requirements and click search. It's really that simple. From here, Alpha will identify all the potential candidates on the market. It will then contact the most suitable options for you, and then you will receive the highest quality CVs who are already interested in working for your company. It's 10 times faster than a LinkedIn job advert, and it's 90% lower cost than a traditional recruitment agency. Get your free trial now at welovealpha.com or click the link in the description.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think doing the code is important, but the other aspects involved in the actual life cycle are arguably even more important. And when you learn to be a developer, you're also learning how to think. It's like learning physics. It's like it gives you a very, very good first principles approach to tackling problems. And some of the best problem solvers I know became the best problem solvers I know because of their ability to code and the fact that they learned that to begin with. You made the jump in your career from a developer to an engineering manager and now to a CTO. And a lot of people, for whatever reason, maybe they don't want to, but for some people that do want to, they kind of struggle to kind of go on that progression and those different stages. So what advice would you give on leading people, on building teams, on hiring, on building culture and getting people working towards a destination? It seems like a lot of managers, let's be honest, they're not great at what they do. What makes a successful leader? What advice would you give to your younger self when you just started the world of managing people?
That's a great question, Alfie. There are two sort of complementary things that pop into my head that I think both help answer that question. And one of them is a strategy that Ryan Holiday outlines in his book Ego is the Enemy, and it's echoed a lot by Simon Sinek as well. And I think that management is not about leading people in the traditional sense of being at the front and telling everybody what to do. Leadership is around making those around you great. And the Canvas strategy is a similar kind of thing. It's about really helping others excel at the things that they love doing. And for me, I think the journey of understanding that and understanding who your team is. A lot of people, I think a lot of managers think of their team as the people who are in their charge, and their team really is the group of people who are their peers. So if you're a manager, it is the other managers in the organization. And Simon Sinek talks about it, in the way of you are not in charge of people; those people are in your charge. And I think that's a great way of thinking about it. You're there to care for them and look great. And for me, great leadership starts with the idea that you should be comfortable when everybody else gets the credit. And if the team achieves their goal and everybody else gets the credit, then that's a great time for you to potentially get the coat and leave while they are celebrating their success. And so I think leadership is in itself quite a humbling thing. And that's what I love about being a leader, is that I'm not looking for credit at any point, because what I want to happen is that the great people who are working in my teams and who I am working with, I want them to excel, and the organization in which we are operating in to excel. And I think getting away from the concept of ego and sort of self-aggrandizement perhaps is the right way to think about it.
I think the best leaders that I've ever worked with, when something goes well, they give full credit to the team, and then when something goes wrong, they take the blame on their shoulders, and they figure out what they can do differently to avoid that mistake happening again. And it's such an ownership respect of doing it, but it's how the best leaders can do it, because you can't, if you're making excuses and pushing blame and trying to push issues onto other people, then you can't really change anything about it. You're limiting yourself from becoming better the next time around. But if you just take it on your shoulders and say, look, here's what happened, here's why it happened, and here's why it won't happen again, it's just a much better way of making sure those problems don't happen again moving forward. So I think that the misconception about leadership is that people think that the leader is the one that stands at the top of the hill and gets all the credit and everyone's clapping them, when in reality it's like, leaders eat last. They're like, they're like the ones that are going into the trenches and doing the things that the team perhaps don't want to do, if that makes sense.
I think there are times when it is incumbent on leaders to lead the charge, so to speak. But for me, that is not about telling people what to do. That is about inspiring people to move forward. Sometimes it's really hard to know what to do and when to do, and often making some progress is better than making no progress, and learning on the way. I'm a huge fan of, there's a Tony Shea, who is used to be the CEO of Zappos. He's not with us, unfortunately, anymore, but he coined this term called greenhouse engineering that I'm a huge fan of. And I think I think of that a lot when I think about my teams. And the idea is that, I mean, realistically, it works really well as an analogy for greenhouses, because if you're trying to grow successful fruiting vegetables, for example, then often if that isn't working out, there isn't any point in yelling at the plants. It's nearly always an environment thing. It's because the environment in which something is trying to be achieved is not right, and that could be, from a greenhouse, the temperature, the soil, it could be the humidity, it could be all sorts of things, and the way in which we operate as teams is exactly the same. And so it's very easy, and I've seen it happen in many organizations where the first conversation is around the capability of individuals and not the environment which the leaders have created under which they are operating in. And so that is absolutely, back to your point of, it's about questioning yourself and how could we have been better? How could I have been better? And how could that have impacted the change, to change the outcome, especially when things are, haven't gone the way that you hoped they would. And that comes back to that point that you said of, you have to take the blame. And I don't think that is traditionally, it was all my fault, because you may not have actually done the work, but what you have done is likely created the environment, and perhaps there are things that could have been differently. And so that learning experience is really important to have as a leader.
Oh, definitely. I have a signed copy, actually, of Tony's book, Delivering Happiness, and it's a great read, and I'd certainly echo the points that you mentioned there. Tony talked quite a lot about setting goals within that book, and over-delivering to customers, and kind of, really going the extra mile to surprise them. On goal setting, last year you tweeted, "The trouble with not having a goal is that you can spend your life running up and down the field and never score." I'll just repeat that one more time. So the trouble with not having a goal is that you can spend your life running up and down the field and never score. Can you just tell me a little bit more about what you meant by this, and I guess your approach to goal setting?
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, because I think if you take it slightly tangentially, it means you never get any shots either. And for me, that is the importance of a goal. It's not always about scoring. It's about sometimes missing and then learning and adapting and changing. And goals in business aren't always right. And sometimes we achieve the goals and they don't have the result that we hope they would. Certainly in terms of, if you're using any form of metric-based assessment, it's quite common that assumptions are made, and that behaviors, and if measuring a certain behavior or customer behavior or a certain financial measurement or any other form of metric that could be implemented as a KPI. But I think that unless you have a goal, then the team just have nothing to focus on, and so you have people create their own goals, and it goes in lots of different directions. So I think having a goal is around inspiring a team to try and achieve a target, and to try and achieve and hopefully score in a wonderful way. But more often than not, well, I'd say more often than not, at least on some occasion, we don't score the goal, but we take shots and miss. And then we can start to understand and think about, why did we miss, and what can we adapt and change, and was that the right goal? And if it is the right goal, how can we be better placed and positioned to hit it?
Yeah, okay, makes sense. I think having goals is really important, Alex, but a lot of people, they have these goals, they have these dreams, and then they never really do anything about them. And I'd say probably 99% of people. I mean, I am generalizing for dramatic effect, but it probably is close to that. You speak to a lot of students, obviously, when you're lecturing, and that's probably a good example to use there. What would you say to people that, for example, those students or people that are in their careers who they have these goals, but they really lack the action required to actually achieve them? You know, how can you go from, hey, here's my dream, to hey, here I'm actually working and doing the steps required to make it happen? Like that bridge, that invisible link that most people don't manage to grasp. Like, what advice would you give to people on not necessarily setting the goal, but how to actually achieve the goal?
So there's a danger of unbridled passion, and we see that a lot. And I think that aligns a little with what you're talking about. Passion is often seen as quite a positive trait, but I think being overly passionate without direction leads to poor decisions. And so I think that there's an equal amount of passionate people that have been successful that have failed, and possibly even more that have failed. And so sometimes we look at that success and define it as part of the behaviors that we need to exhibit. And it's quite easy in some senses to be passionate and to talk passionately and to about our vision, and to imagine what will happen when our vision has been realized and all of the things that come with that. But really that's quite almost an egotistical place to be. And so I think it's important that people need to embrace humility, and they need to acknowledge that they don't have all the answers, and that means that there is an opening for learning and for growth, and the inclusion of diverse perspectives. I think diversity, I think that's the sort of killer trait for having diversity, is that you get more opinions and a wider number of perspectives. And I think it's more important to focus on purpose than passion. And I think that effective leaders align their actions with a clean purpose, with a clear purpose and strategic objectives. And I think that ensures that their efforts contribute more meaningfully to their goals. You know, discipline and self-awareness and controlling your ego to some extent is really important. Passion is definitely one of the attributes that counts to that. It's useful in times of strife and difficulty, but I think that the importance of tempering ego and passion with humility, purpose, and self-discipline is perhaps sometimes understated.
And on that journey to taking the action required to achieve your goals, I mean, it's basically guaranteed that you're going to face a lot of failure along the way. I don't know a single person who's had a great career or has built a great company or has done anything worthy of note that hasn't failed until they eventually succeeded. So oftentimes the real difference I find, Alex, between somebody that has succeeded and failed is just their ability to not give up along the way and to just keep persisting and keep going through. So I guess what would you say to people, whether it's your students or just other people listening right now that have been working on their goals, they're experiencing these challenges, and they're perhaps thinking about quitting? What do you think separates the people that quit versus the people that don't quit? How can the people that give up change and to have the thick skin required to get to where they need to go?
So we have to be able to, I mean, it goes back to some of the things I was saying earlier. I think being humble, being able to learn and reflect is important. I think reflection for me is one of the most important tools that any organization, team leader, take on board. But I think that reflection starts with a balance between accepting who you are and accepting the boundaries of your capabilities, and then understanding that you can learn and plan and act to improve on those. It's easy to, there's a fine balance when reflecting, because often it can end up in a world of just self-deprecation, and that's not at all the goal of reflection. It's totally okay to fail, and that's okay, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up for that. And so the understanding, but there's a lot of emotion that comes with that, and with certainly with failure. And so putting aside or facing into the emotion to try and understand where that comes from, and then deciding whether or not there is still a benefit to moving forward, means that you can hopefully understand a little bit more about what needs to happen next. So, it's this idea of detaching self-worth from success. Just because our ego ties our identity to our achievements, and failure in a task doesn't diminish your value as a person. So detaching your self-worth from success allows you to sort of analyze the situation objectively without personal bias, to seek the opinion of others, to be more self-aware and reflect honestly on what led to failure. Ego blinds us very often to our own shortcomings, and by being self-aware, we hope to be able to identify areas for improvement without self-deception. Avoiding blame and excuses, and focusing on the process helps to guide the outcome. Obviously, staying resilient is really important as part of that team, but cultivating resilience it takes time, and usually that means going through failure.
Okay, cool. Let's switch to some cutting edge tech to finish off with. So you got to play with the Apple Vision Pro just before it came out, and you wrote a great blog post about this and some of the features. I've tried it a bunch since it's been out, and it's pretty cool. I mean, I'm probably quite bearish on XR in the short term, but I'm very, very bullish in the long term with like the Meta Orion glasses. I think clearly we have the path to a replacement for the smartphone, or at least for the a big chunk of the features which are being used by a smartphone. I'm not sure if we'll completely get rid of it entirely, but I do believe some kind of glasses. I mean, I have the Meta Ray-Bans, for example. Apart from them being pretty uncomfortable to wear, they are very, very cool. It being able to look at anything and ask it features with the cameras about, and the AI will then tell me information or listen to calls or change the volume. And there's lots of cool things within them from an AR perspective. And then from a VR perspective, which is much more immersive, I've had all of the Meta Quests, and then even going back to like Google Cardboard. I've been in that world for a long, long time. And I think with the Vision Pro, it was really cool to see that progression. It's still very expensive, and the average person is not going to pay $4,000 to get that. But when the price comes down and we have perhaps not the Apple Vision Pro, but the Apple Vision 3 or 4, and it's super mainstream, then we're talking, serious widespread adoption. But what are your thoughts on the device, having played with it pre-launch, and what are your thoughts on the future of I guess, mixed reality?
So the device itself I thought was amazing, and I'm similar to you, have had many of the VR headsets throughout the years, and often found them, for all sorts of reasons, clunky and difficult to use, and all these other things. Apple, for me, game changed that world. I think their headset is comfortable. It's which is a starting place for some of those older headsets. I think the interface, for me, one of the initial reflections very quickly was that it made me the ability to hold your hand on your lap and to kind of just tap your fingers together to type, and with the combination of the accuracy of eye tracking on the keyboard controls, instantly made me feel like keyboards were like old school technology. And I tried desperately in the time that I was using it to see if I could type at any kind of sustainably fast rate, which obviously I couldn't. I've had years of using a keyboard. I am conditioned into being able to type quickly, so it was difficult to maintain the same kind of speed. And the eye tracking had a few little nuances that confused me slightly, but Apple brought a level of expected, as they do with everything, interface slickness that really felt amazing. And I think it was a big step change in the right direction. I agree with you. I think VR struggles with its implementation. The devices are heavy. They break what is a very natural eye contact level of communication in terms of engaging with other people. But I have often held, I was secretly very sad that the Google Glass was discontinued. I think Google Glass was a great piece of technology, and I often wonder I understand why they necessarily couldn't, but I wonder what would have happened if they'd just taken the camera off. It might have changed the game a little bit, but I think the cameras are important, and and a part of the product that comes. Facebook Orion is another game-changing piece of technology, and I think it will just continue to iterate. And I think the realization of the use cases may even be in areas that aren't obvious straight away. So for those people who are visually impaired or partially sighted right now, those Facebook Orion glasses are, could be game changing. Even the current Meta Ray-Ban glasses, and you look at technology that exists in that space already, it's incredibly expensive. There are headset devices that you can clip onto your glasses that will help you with, help visually impaired and partially sighted people identify and recognize their surroundings, but they cost almost 10 times the cost of a pair of Ray-Ban, Meta Ray-Ban glasses. And they don't even do some of the basic things like recognizing a £10 note, for example. So I think that I look forward to the day when society laughs at us all for holding a phone and being so hung up on these little black devices that we carried in our pockets everywhere. And I think similar to that, which I think you perhaps feel, I think it's inevitable that we will go in that direction, because it feels like it makes sense.
I think so. I think glasses are clearly the future. I think the glasses will become the majority of the interactions that we see, whether that's notifications, maps with an arrow pointing us where to go, or just a heads-up sort of display. I think smartwatches are here to stay because of the haptic required. Like with the Orion glasses, there is some kind of a wrist element that you need to also wear in order to do a lot of like the touches and the controls. I think that will probably bleed its way into smartwatches, and I do think we'll have some level of phone to a degree, like with the Vision Pro, you're doing the battery pack, for example. If there was a way of connecting the glasses to the phone, ideally with no wires, then obviously that would be great. So I do think it's a case of this and this and this rather than this or this. However, I do believe the glasses are probably like the future. If I had to bet on one of them, that would be like the main one to put the money into. And clearly, that's what Meta are doing. They put more money into building like mixed reality than I think than it cost us to go to the moon the first time. So it's the biggest moonshot ever to have R&D invested into, and it's great to finally see it paying off, because in the earlier days when you saw that cringy picture of Mark Zuckerberg standing with the Eiffel Tower in the background and it was like blocky Sims graphics, and that was just a couple of years ago, the exponential growth that it's got on now is unreal, and it's great to see it finally pay dividends. I guess last question around like Web3, because I guess I'd call that Web3 is kind of in that world. Blockchain is another aspect which gets thrown into that term, and that's obviously what you're largely building on and have been working on. So what are your views on the future of blockchain? I guess you could tie that into crypto and Bitcoin and money, but I guess blockchain is a lot more than just Bitcoin. It's about a much wider ecosystem than that specific use case. What are your thoughts on blockchain and the future in that world?
So I think it's a great piece of technology. I think it's overhyped in terms of what it's capable of doing. It's not as exciting as an actual tech stack. I do think that we have to get past the world of, I don't want to use the term, but we have to get past the world of crypto bros and I think we are, hopefully progressing that way. I think it's one tool in an engineer's armory of kind of potential options to consider. And so I think it just needs to find its niche. And I think its niche, to be honest, is potentially quite boring. Ledgers are not exciting. But I think the ability and the implementation of it could be, and I think the openness nature of it is exceptional. I mean, in some ways, it's almost a counter to some of the potential challenges that might come from AR. We have to be really mindful of societal change in the world, and the impact that technology, and certainly rapid development of technology, can bring. And technology like blockchain, which relies on its open nature to some extent, doesn't have to necessarily be, helps us to, or could help us. Its interoperability and all of the things that go along with that are really useful. From an engineering perspective, it's hard right now. And the reason it's difficult to build on blockchain at scale is because of a lot of the challenges that I think I mentioned earlier. There's some how engineers develop on it, how much it costs to create multiple environments and to be able to run tests, and those kind of things really can get in the way, or the automation tools are not mature at all for it. So these problems have to be solved as part of the journey, and they will be solved when the technology finds its niche and starts to become widely adopted, as they have been with all these other worlds. And so I think that, I think it's a great piece of kit. I think it's a great bit of technology. I love the fact it's so open, or it can be utilized in that way. But I just think it needs to find its natural home and its natural uses, and move away from perhaps some of the hype and certainly some of the potential misuses that it's had in its past.
Yeah, it's a valid comment. Fair enough. Cool. Well, look, thank you for that, Alex. It's been a bit of a masterclass, really, in advice for juniors, advice for people stepping into leadership, tips on people on setting goals, on achieving them, and then the predictions and thoughts on the future of AI and VR and Web3 and blockchain and beyond, really. If people have enjoyed this and they want to check out, I guess, more about you or whatever, if there was one place where they should go, would it be your LinkedIn or your website, or what link should I put on the screen right now?
My LinkedIn's probably the best one.
Okay, great. Well, I'll include your name below there right now, so feel free to go to your page if anyone's watching and wants to speak further. Cool. Well, thanks very much, Alex. It's been great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Alfie. It's been great to talk.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode. I really, really appreciate it. I hope it brought you some value. And if you haven't already, please remember to click subscribe or follow wherever you're watching this podcast now.